I uncovered a haunted storage unit. 13 sinister secrets of a cursed monster hunter revealed. Sarah had heard whispers about Edgar Whitley, the local folklore expert turned monster hunter, whose infamous storage unit was set to be auctioned that night. Her heart raced with an electrifying mix of dread and excitement. Could he have left something valuable behind? With bills piled high at home, the idea of unearthing hidden treasures tugged at her desperate hope. She picked up her kids, Lily and Ben, and they made their way to the dimly lit auction lot. Surrounded by a chorus of flickering fluorescent lights that hummed ominously in the cool evening air as she stood at the auction site. Surrounded by strangers with empty eyes, she couldn't help but feel a creeping sense of unease. But the allure of new beginnings outweighed her worries. When Edgar's unit came up, she felt a wild urge swell in her chest. Against the hesitant murmurs of the crowd, she placed her bid, uncertainty giving way to impulsive dreams. Once it was hers, excitement bubbled like a soft drink shaken too hard. But the thrill quickly turned sour when she pried open the lock. An overwhelming wave of mildew and something acrid poured out like a suffocating fog. Sarah held her breath, fighting the urge to gag. Rummaging through the spidery contents, a tattered fishing net, journals scrawled with frantic details of clawed beasts, her pulse quickened. Each photo, disturbingly vivid, sent chills down her spine. Something felt deeply wrong, and yet, desperation coiled tightly in her stomach. She plucked up a journal and flipped through its pages, only to find passages detailing grotesque creatures, their features described in twisted detail. The darkness of the unit echoed her own mounting fears as shadows crept closer, wrapping around her legs like looming tendrils. Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system, and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. At home, the atmosphere thickened into a leaden weight. Lily awoke screaming from dreams of clawed hands stretching towards her, eyes wide with terror. Ben's confusion boiled over into rage, his little fists pummeling anything in sight. Shadows began to dance along the walls, barely recognizable figures enacting a macabre ballet just out of reach. The abandoned whispers of neighbors turned sharper, filled with barely disguised concern. Just stress, they said. You need rest. Rest? Their eyes told her they thought she was unraveling. But as nights wore on, the haunting escalated. Doors creaked open on their own. Strange noises echoed like taunts from the dark storage unit looming in her yard. The once familiar home transformed into a trap, every slight sound sending ripples of fear down her spine. Sarah felt their looming presence even as she locked the storage unit tightly. Too late. That creeping awareness whispered otherwise. A horrifying journal hidden beneath the floorboards offered a desperate scrap of clarity. Edgar Whitley's tales of madness traced an intertwined history with her family, a line that connected their fates with the encroaching darkness. Just as dread settled in her bones, a crash erupted from the children's room. Terror propelled her feet forward, heart thundering in her ears. Whatever had slipped out of that cursed storage unit wasn't done with them. It wanted more. What had she awakened? Sarah's breath came quick, the shadows closed in, and though she fought to shield her children, she couldn't shake the sinking realization she had drawn the monster out. As Sarah burst into the children's room, the chaos greeted her. Toys were scattered across the floor, and the curtains billowed as if the wind howled through them, even though all the windows were tightly shut. Lily huddled in the far corner, her body trembling and eyes wide with fear, while Ben stood defiantly, fists clenched like a small warrior ready to defend against an unseen foe. "Mommy," Lily whimpered. "It's in here." A chill crept down Sarah's spine. She scanned the room, every shadow stretching and shifting, whispering dark secrets she was too scared to hear. "What's in here, sweetheart?" She pushed through chattering teeth, her heart racing as adrenaline flooded her system. She reached for the night light, the comforting glow flickering as if wavers of dark intent tugged at it. The clawed thing, Ben shouted, his voice cracking. I saw it. Just outside the window. He pointed, legs shaking. Sarah's gaze followed his finger. Shadows danced unsettlingly on the curtains as though they had their own heartbeat. Ignoring every instinct telling her to flee, she approached. She pulled back the fabric, her breath caught in her throat. Nothing. Just the inky night staring back at her. But that was almost worse. She felt its presence lurking, always just out of sight. It's just your imagination. She tried to soothe, but the quiver in her voice betrayed her. There's nothing here. Mom! It was real. Look! Ben yelled, launching a small toy towards the window. For a heartbeat, silence reigned. Then, the children's laughter turned to screams as the toy struck something outside a hum. A low thrum that vibrated through the panes, rattling Sarah to her core. Undulating shadows twisted beneath the sudden dimness of the night. Get back. Sarah shielded Lily and Ben in her embrace, the threat igniting a desperate instinct to protect. A scraping noise came from the outside, claw-like against the wood. Panicked, she slammed the window shut, the glass rattling in protest. Mommy, it's here, Lily cried, pressing her face into Sarah's shoulder, her tiny frame shaking like a leaf. Another crash resonated from the storage unit, a deep echo that vibrated with unknowable intensity. It seemed to breathe with a life of its own, drawing her back outside with an unfathomable pull. No, she snapped at the walls, anger surging through her. She was not going to let whatever cursed energy fill her home, not while her children stood between the menace and her heart. But that determination faltered. Edgar's journal had hinted at familial links to this horror. What if it was never just the storage unit? What if she had unleashed horrors that had crawled through her bloodline, eager to reclaim their vengeance? Suddenly, the lights flickered, plunging them into temporary darkness. The sound of scratching grew louder, resolute. Mommy, I'm scared, Ben whispered, gripping her tighter. Me too, honey, but we need to stay together. Sarah forced the words out, barely holding back her dread. Just then, a swift shadow darted past the room's threshold, making a beeline towards the children's favorite spot, a collection of stuffed animals. In a breathless surge of adrenaline, Sarah moved to intercept it. No, she shouted, lunging to block whatever horror awaited. But as Sarah rushed forward, the gasping curtain flared out around her like a shroud, and the world spun. What awaited beyond her vision was as uncertain as the very darkness she fought against. And in that brief moment, she understood. It wasn't just a monster outside her window. It was something much older, something that wanted in. All those stories Edgar had written were real, more than she'd ever had the courage to believe. Get to the living room. Now, she yelled, pushing them toward the door, the air crackling with foreboding. They rushed fast as shadows pressed in, nearly suffocating her with dread. But it didn't matter. They would find a way out. Or so she thought, as each step brought them closer to the heart of the nightmare. What had she really awakened? The answer loomed ever closer, clawed fingers inches. From their fate, the living room was dimly lit, the flickering bulbs casting erratic shadows that danced like sinister phantoms around them. Sarah slammed the door behind them, locking it with trembling fingers. She turned to her children, panic etched on her face. Stay close to me, she instructed, struggling to keep the tremor from her voice. The scratching sound picked up again, a relentless tattoo against the outside walls. It didn't just scrape. It scratched with the urgency of something desperate, wanting in. The children clung to her, eyes wide and unblinking, fear swirling in their innocent gazes. Mommy! Lily's voice broke through the cacophony, a piercing wail that wrapped around Sarah's heart. What was that? What's happening? Another crash resonated from the storage unit outside, followed by an unsettling silence, as if the world held its breath. Sarah's heart raced, each beat pounding a reminder of the danger lurking just beyond her reach. They had to move. Let us find something to barricade the door, she said, leading them towards the kitchen. She felt like a soldier navigating a battlefield, every instinct screaming to retreat. But retreating wasn't an option. As they scoured the room for anything that could help, a distant growl reverberated through the air, low and menacing. Questions flooded her mind, flashing images of claws and teeth, of whispered threats coursing through the shadows. What had she unleashed? What dark entity was entwined with her family's past? Ben tugged at her sleeve, his voice barely above a whisper. "Mommy, what if it gets in?" Her stomach dropped. If it breached the door, there would be nowhere to run. She grabbed a pair of kitchen chairs and hurled them against the door, feeling the vibrations of her pulse thrumming through the wood. "Hold on tight," she said, trying to reassure him. She felt a momentary rush of ease as she looked at her children, their trust nestled within their trembling forms. If she could keep them safe, maybe, just maybe, they could survive this. But even as she thought it, a haunting howl erupted from the outside, a guttural sound that sent her gut twisting into a knot of terror. It was a sound that echoed through time, filled with anguish and fury. The children whimpered, pressing against her again. Suddenly, the lights flickered violently before going dark. The house was swallowed in darkness, engulfing them in a suffocating void. Felt wrong, predatory. The darkness felt like a living thing, pulsing and shifting. "Mommy!" Lily whimpered, clutching her tightly. Then came the deafening crash. The door shuddered violently as something slammed against it from outside. Wood splintered, and fear coursed through Sarah like ice. She turned to face her children, bracing herself for the fight of their lives. She felt panic clawing at her resolve, but the memory of those pages in Edgar's journal surged to the forefront of her mind. The sketches of twisted creatures, the warnings scrawled in haste. What if whatever was outside was waiting for her to fail? Just then, a shadow slipped through the narrow sliver of light at the door's edge. It was more than a shadow, though. It was a shape, a figure. Tall and jagged, it writhed and twisted unsettlingly as it came closer. Sarah's breath hitched in her throat. "Get back," she shouted, her voice raw with desperation. She grabbed the nearest kitchen knife, her own hand trembling with the weight of it. But would it even be enough? Terror flooded her senses as the figure pushed its way against the door. The wood began to crack, splintering with the barely held threat of what lurked beyond. And just like that, it hit her. The true horror was never just about surviving this moment. It was about the relentless history that followed her, clawing at her heels, refusing to let go. The door gave way with a final, resounding crash, and as light flooded in, it revealed more than she could bear. "Run!" she screamed, shoving the children toward the back door. But what awaited them outside could be worse than the terror that had just breached their sanctuary. Sarah's heart raced, but this was no longer about fleeing. It was about confronting the creature. Whatever darkness lay in wait to reclaim what it believed was rightfully its. What would she be willing to sacrifice to protect her children from what had come home? The light spilled through the shattered doorframe, illuminating a figure that danced on the edge of reality. Though it faded into the murk of the corner, the shape lingered in her mind, a pit of darkness wrapped tightly around abominable limbs. "Mommy, please," Ben whimpered, pulling at her jeans with small, trembling hands. Without a second thought, Sarah turned and dashed toward the back door, heart drumming loudly in her ears. The children followed closely behind, their bare feet quiet against the cold tile, as frozen air wrapped around them like a vice. The coolness was sharp, like needles jabbing at her panic-stricken skin. They burst through the back door, plunging into a darkened yard overrun by an unnerving stillness. The world beyond their cramped home had morphed, every familiar shape now tinged with horror. Trees dripped black shadows, moonlight filtering through twisted branches to etch grotesque forms into the ground. Sarah knelt down, pressing her ear to the ground as if listening for the heartbeat of the nightmare lurking in the darkness. "We need to get to the car," she whispered urgently. "Stay low and don't make a sound." Each step felt monumental, the gravel crunching beneath them echoing like distant thunderclaps. The children moved like ghosts, silent but alive with fear as they followed her lead. She could sense it, the darkness wrapping tighter, insidious fingers creeping from every corner of the expansive shadows. Just as they reached the edge of the yard, something changed. A guttural growl, deeper and more urgent than before, reverberated from behind them, sending a cold rush of terror straight through her. "Run!" she gasped, barely processing the primal urge for self-preservation that surged through her veins. They sprinted toward the car, breathless, her heart racing along an abyss of dread. The growl transformed into something animalistic and high-pitched, scratching at the edges of her sanity. It escalated into an otherworldly scream, one that seemed to pierce through the night sky. With adrenaline pumping, they reached the car. Sarah fumbled with the keys, her hands slick with sweat. The world around them pulsed and twisted with shadows, an unseen predator prowling close. Just as she managed to unlock the door, a chittering sound fluttered in the air like nails against glass. She whipped around, eyes wide with terror. The darkness formed into a distinct shape, a wide, hollow-eyed face emerging from the night. It was smaller than the creature before but no less terrifying, grinning with jagged teeth that glimmered unnaturally in the moonlight. "Mommy!" Lily cried, her voice a stark contrast against the creeping silence. The thing's attention shifted toward her daughter, its shadow stretching toward the innocent form. "Get in the car. Now!" Sarah barked, her voice choking on fear. Ben obeyed, jumping in as Sarah yanked Lily towards her. The moment felt infinite as the creature tilted its head, genuinely intrigued. As Sarah shoved Lily into the passenger seat, the scream of the thing erupted into the night, vibrating the very air around them. It launched itself forward, sharp claws scraping against the car window with raw intensity. The window shattered like glass confetti, sending shards spiraling into the car. "Go! Go!" Sarah screamed at Ben, who was frantically trying to start the engine. Anxiety clutched her heart. The growl deepened as she felt the creature pressing closer, waiting to claim what was rightfully its. Would the car prove a barrier against this evil? How long could they keep running before it caught them? In an instant, Ben hit the gas pedal, and the car lurched forward. They sped into the night, leaving the monster clawing at the shards of their vulnerability. But the reality loomed heavy. What had she unearthed? What kind of twisted legacy was following them, prepared to exact a terrible reckoning? White-knuckled and trembling, Sarah peered into the rearview mirror, the darkness taking shape behind them. But just as she braced herself for the worst, the headlights caught something that chilled her to the core. Standing at the edge of the yard was a figure, faint and flickering. Watching them leave, what claustrophobic secret would that figure unveil? The car tore down the street, engines roaring and tires screeching against the asphalt. But the terror clung to them like a chilling fog. Sarah's heart raced. Her insides twisted as images of the grinning creature flickered in her mind. Each time she exhaled, it felt like a cold hand gripped her throat, threatening to choke off her breath. "Mommy, did you see it?" Ben asked, his voice small and trembling from the back seat. "I saw it, honey. Just keep your eyes straight ahead," Sarah replied, forcing steadiness into her tone. She glanced at Lily, who was staring silently out the window, her expression hollow as if the terror had stolen her voice. They navigated the dimly lit streets, every shadow looming larger as fear amplified with each passing second. It felt like the darkness beyond their windows was chasing them, swelling like a living thing, an unrelenting predator with intent. Sarah gripped the wheel, knuckles white, her breath shallow. Suddenly, Ben gasped. "Mommy, look!" She instinctively turned her gaze toward the rearview mirror again, and her stomach dropped. There, amidst the shadows, was that same flickering figure, following them with a dreadful speed. It appeared to stride alongside the vehicle, growing more palpable, more real. "Hold on," she screamed, slamming her foot down harder on the accelerator. The engine roared, and the world blurred past them. The figure danced in the darkness but never lost its ground, its eyes locked onto her, an insatiable hunger boiling just beneath the surface. "Faster! You have to go faster!" Ben cried, the desperation in his voice rising. Sarah nodded, brazenly pushing the car's limits, praying the speed would put distance between them and whatever that figure was. But deep down, she felt it wasn't just about speed. It was about a history, a twisted past ready to reclaim what it lost. She couldn't help thinking about the memory of that grin. It lingered in her mind, a constant reminder. The road ahead twisted into a sharp bend. "Hold on," she shouted again as she yanked the wheel, tumbling around the corner. They skidded slightly but regained traction. Her heart pounded as her eyes darted to the side, spotting an alleyway that seemed to beckon like a dark portal. Without thinking, she veered into the alley. The car fit snugly between damp brick walls, illuminating the dark goo clinging to the stones. An eerie silence followed, pierced only by the distant echo of their racing pulse. "Where are we?" Lily whispered, dread draping over her small frame. "I don't know," Sarah admitted, her mind racing for answers. "But we can't stay here suddenly." A crack echoed from the rear of the car. Sarah's heart lurched, her breath hitching as they all turned. The alley swallowed the light, darkness shifting again, solidifying, taking form. The figure materialized in a blink, closer now. Its face shadowed but unmistakable, the contours of its hollow eyes glistened like hungry stars. "I think it wants in," Ben whispered, his innocent tone laced with terror. "Stay down," Sarah shouted as she threw the car into reverse, desperate to escape this nightmare. But the figure began to chant softly, its voice a serpentine hiss winding through the alley, every word curling around them, squeezing in like a vice. "Me." The fear bubbling in her threatened to overflow. Just then, a jagged crack cut across the windshield, the creature's shadow clawing through the darkness, relentless in its pursuit. Her hands flew to the gearshift. "Hold on." They shot out of the alley, but the road before them twisted like a serpent, narrowing as trees loomed like ancient sentinels. A white-knuckle ride into the unknown. The figure faded into the rearview once more, shifting like a mirage. But the voice was unmistakable. "Let me in." What did it want? Was it just the beginning of their unraveling? As they fled, Sarah's thoughts spiraled with dread. Could the darkness ever truly be left behind? What lay ahead in the twisted road of fate? The forest pressed in around them, dark and suffocating, and she knew the chase had only just begun. What sinister truths awaited in the shadows just beyond the trees? The trees closed in, their gnarled branches clawing at the car like skeletal fingers. Every twist of the road felt like an invitation to the abyss, a suffocating grip tightening with each mile. The shadows loomed larger now, swallowing any hope they had left. Sarah glanced at her children, their faces drawn tight with fear, the same fear that gnawed at her insides. "Keep your head down," she called, forcing herself to stay in control. Sweat trickled down her back, chilling her spine. She could hear the murmurs of that horrible chant repeating in her mind, echoing louder. "Me." It was a macabre lullaby that stirred a raw panic deep within her. What did it mean? What did it want? Her foot pressed harder on the gas, and the engine howled like a wounded animal, but she felt like they were barely flying. The creature's presence stalked them, an insidious shadow in the periphery, growing ever closer with each heartbeat. "Mommy, it's behind us." Ben's voice shot through the darkness, piercing her resolve. The urgency gripped her like iron. I know." She could feel themselves straying further into the heart of this haunted wood. Mist rolled over the road, thick and suffocating, swirling like spirits beneath the moonlit sky. Every heartbeat echoed an impending doom. "We need to get out of here," Lily whimpered, squeezing her stuffed animal tightly. Its button eyes stared wide and unblinking, a jarring contradiction to the chaos surrounding them and desperation. Sarah scanned the trees. She recalled a rumor about a cabin, an old refuge rumored to be hidden deeper within these woods, a hope tethered to memory. "There's a cabin up ahead," she muttered. "An old hunting shack. We'll go there." "Mommy, is that safe?" Ben's fear-laden question rang heavy. Safer than this, her voice was uncertain, but she pressed on. At a sharp turn revealed an opening in the forest, and there it stood, the cabin, weathered and dark, a ghost of its former self. Heart racing, she swung the car around, tires screeching as they slung gravel. "Get out. We have to go," Sarah shouted, scrambling to unbuckle her seatbelt and swinging open the door. A chill raced through her as she ushered her children out. The door slammed shut with a deafening finality that echoed in the stillness. The cabin loomed over them, a sinister silhouette against the tapestry of shadows. They hesitated for just a moment, all three standing together, breaths echoing in the silence. A sense of something the same chill that held them in fear wrapped around them tighter, whispering of secrets long kept. Before she could open the cabin door, the singing echoed again, closer and sharper, wrapping around her mind. Me. There's something in there, Ben cried out, pointing to the darkened cabin. I can feel it. Mommy, I'm scared. Lily's voice cracked, raw with fear. No, it's okay, we'll be safe here. Sarah tried to assure them, pushing against her own rising dread. She took a step forward, fingertips brushing the door. But the moment lingered too long, a pause heavy with danger. Between the chanting and the dark forest closing in tighter, dread seeped into her bones. What if they were walking into a trap? What if this was precisely where the figure wanted them? As if sensing her hesitation, a loud thud echoed from within the cabin, followed by something that felt like a gentle tug, almost a command, drawing her closer. Mommy, Lily whispered, eyes wide, full of fear, and somehow, glistening with a hint of curiosity. Let us go inside, Sarah replied, fighting against every instinct telling her to run. They stepped forward together into the darkness, unsure if they were running to safety or into the very jaws of despair. All at once, the door creaked open, a beckoning void swallowing them whole, and as they crossed the threshold, the world outside began to fade. Of one thing she was certain, the chase was far from over, and whatever was waiting inside the cabin, it thirsted for something, and it would not let them leave until it got what it wanted. What had they just walked into? Could it uncover the truth behind the creature's relentless pursuit? Would the walls of the cabin hold answers, or would they chain them to an even darker fate? The door creaked open wider, revealing a darkness thicker than the night itself. It swallowed them as they entered, the air suddenly damp and cold, creeping under their skin. Sarah felt like they had stepped into a tomb more than a shelter. She flicked on her phone's flashlight, the beam illuminating the dust motes dancing in the stagnant air. The cabin was cluttered, filled with old furniture shrouded in gray sheets, half-visible shapes that loomed ominously in the light. Stay close, she whispered, her voice barely above a tremor. Ben and Lily nodded, clinging to their mother like they were anchors tethering her to some semblance of sanity. A heavy silence enveloped them, pressing down on their shoulders, as though the cabin itself was alive, aware of their presence. A chill clawed at Sarah's spine, gnawing at her resolve. The chanting grew louder in her mind, dissonant and insistent. Let me in. Suddenly, the floorboard creaked beneath her feet, an eerie groan echoing through the stillness. Sarah turned sharply, the flashlight beam shaking, dancing over the walls covered in faded, peeling wallpaper. Dark stains marred the corner's irises. Fate whispered through time. What's that? Ben asked, eyes wide. Sarah's heart raced. She approached a cracked window, the glass like a prism of nightmares. Outside, the forest loomed as menacing as before, cloaked in shadows and secrets. But something caught her eye, a figure darting between the trees, impossibly quick, punctured by the flashes of the flashlight. Sarah shivered. Mommy, can we go back? Lily's whispered please snapped her from the trance. Not yet. Sarah's soothing tone cracked. She turned to the room, assessing their surroundings, hoping to find safety or a weapon to defend them if need be. A heavy chest sat against the wall, a ghostly silhouette against the light. Help me, came a soft voice from inside the chest. Sarah froze. The voice was warm, almost comforting, wrapped in an echo of longing. Please open the box. Did you hear that? Ben asked, his eyes wide. Don't listen to it. Sarah shot back, the claws of fear gripping her. Could be a trap. But the voice persisted, weaving through the shadows, wrapping around her thoughts. Let me out, I can help you. Lily stepped forward, her small hand reaching for the latch. I want to help, Mommy. What if it's friendly? No, Sarah gasped, pulling her daughter back, terror swelling in her chest. We can't trust it. The shadows writhed with a life of their own, the very air charged with malice, as if whatever was trapped inside had been waiting for them, starving for freedom. A loud crash jolted them, the front door slamming shut from a sudden gust of wind or something more sinister. The walls of the cabin seemed to pulse with an unseen energy, and the voice intensified, pleading now, weaving desperation with desire. The air grew thick, and with each second, the cabin's secrets felt more demanding, like a creature hungry for salvation. Sarah, a low murmur crept from the corners of the room, a deeper presence rising. You must choose, let me in. What is happening? Ben sobbed, holding tightly to Lily. The flashlight flickered violently, casting an erratic glow that revealed shadowy figures swirling along the edges of the room, malicious eyes lurking in the dark. They were watching, hungry. They needed to make a choice, and fast. Would they escape, or were they destined to bind themselves to the darkness lurking within? With courage pulling against her fear, Sarah took a deep breath, her heart pounding like a prisoner desperate for freedom. She eyed the chest one more time, ready to make a decision that could change everything. Should we? She hesitated. Open it? But before they could decide, a deafening knock echoed from the door, followed by the familiar, spine-chilling chant. Let me in. The darkness thickened, the air suffocating, as dread clutched their throats. What would happen next? Would they doom themselves by acting or by hesitating? The revelation hovered in the air like an impending storm, and as the darkness writhed around them, Sarah knew that whatever came next could either save them or seal their fate forever. The knock shattered the suffocating silence, each thud resonating like a heartbeat echoing in the stillness. Sarah's breath hitched as the weight of the choice loomed over them, a decision that felt more like a curse. The walls vibrated with a sinister energy, and the shadows seized the moment to twist and writhe, becoming almost tangible. Mommy, please. Lily's voice broke through the chaos, her tiny hands clutching Sarah's arm like a lifeline. Ben's eyes darted around the room, searching for escape, while the chanting morphed into a maddening cacophony in Sarah's mind. It was like the darkness itself had become sentient, whispering secrets only she could understand. Let me in. Hold on, Sarah shouted, her voice rising above the clamoring voices. She was determined not to let the enchantment claim her children. We're not opening anything. In that moment of defiance, the shadows in the cabin recoiled slightly, as if her resolve momentarily startled them. But the weight of dread pressed down harder. She could feel it, a palpable intensity clawing at her sanity. What was in that chest? What waited behind the door? The knock came again, louder, sentient, shaking the very foundation of the cabin. The floorboards beneath her feet trembled, making her heart race violently. The ghostly voice from the chest grew frantic, now almost pleading. Sarah, let me help you. They won't stop until you do. Make it stop. Ben screamed, burying his face in Lily's hair. The sound of his panic fueled Sarah's own terror, a vicious circle spiraling into the abyss. Without thinking, Sarah stumbled toward the chest. A surge of curiosity pierced through her fear. What if opening the chest meant salvation? Yet, a deeper instinct screamed at her that it might unleash something worse. The atmosphere felt electric, each second stretching taut like a wire ready to snap. Do you want to be trapped like me? Fear controls them, but you can break it. Open the box. The voice wrapped around her, seductive and sinister. It was a siren's call, tempting her to release the darkness. Stop it, Sarah cried out, shaking her head violently. She felt the walls closing in, abnormal shapes curling just outside the beam of light. They were watching. They were waiting. The flashlight flickered again, illuminating ghastly visions, faces twisted in agony, whispering her name as if they knew her. Sarah, you belong here. Get away from her, she yelled, shoving the flashlight toward the door as if it could push the shadows back. Yet the door didn't budge, reaffirming her isolation in this cabin from hell. With each passing moment, it became impossibly clear. The trap was tightening. She was caught, and if she didn't make a choice soon, they would drag her and her kids into the depths of whatever madness haunted these walls. The only sound was the dreadful chant, beckoning her further into the darkness. "Open it," Lily implored. "Please, Mommy." When Sarah met her daughter's wide, fearful eyes, a sense of defiance shattered the fear within her. "No," she shouted again, feeling more certain. Suddenly, she grabbed Ben and Lily's hands, their warmth cutting through her chill. "We have to get out." Turning sharply, she rushed for the door, but just as they reached it, the floor shuddered violently. A deep, grating growl rumbled from the chest, sending a harsh vibration through the cabin. The voice that had beckoned them turned furious, merging with the howl of wind caught in the trees outside. "You mine." The door flung open with a crash, leaving a yawning darkness beyond, but the way out twisted with a shadowy figure looming, monstrous, waiting. "Run!" Sarah screamed, as a tide of darkness crushed down upon them, ready to devour. Would they escape the grasping terror of the cabin, or would they be pulled back inside, lost to an eternal night? As they fled, the air crackled with dark energy, and the whispers grew louder, hungry for their fear. What awaited them outside in the thick, cold forest? Were they truly free, or had they merely traded one brand of horror for another? The forest enveloped them like a living creature, branches clawing at their clothes and shadows shifting with malicious intent. Sarah ran, her heart hammering in her chest, the terrible growl of the chest still ringing in her ears. Behind her, she could hear Ben and Lily's terrified breaths, desperation etched into the very fabric of their beings. "Stay close," Sarah urged, glancing behind them. The darkness hadn't followed, but she could feel it, lurking at the edges of her mind like a predator waiting for the right moment to strike. The trees loomed tall and menacing, their gnarled roots tripping her as she navigated the underbrush in a frantic bid for safety. "What was that thing?" Ben gasped, his breath sharp with panic. Sweat glistened on his brow despite the chill of the autumn night. "I don't know, we just have to keep moving," Sarah replied, forcing her voice to stay steady. But fear gnawed at her resolve, each step feeling like a misstep into an abyss from where there would be no return. They stumbled into a small clearing, the moonlight barely penetrating the thick canopy above. Sarah's pulse quickened as she caught her breath, scanning their surroundings. The oppressive darkness was still there, a constant pressure in the air, but for now, they seemed free from immediate pursuit. "Mommy," Lily whispered, clutching her mother's hand tighter. Her small frame shook with palpable fear. "What if it comes back?" Sarah knelt to meet her daughter's gaze, her heart aching. "I want tea, let it. We'll find help." But the conviction in those words felt fragile, as unreal as the shadows creeping through the underbrush. The forest was a vast labyrinth. One wrong turn could lead back to the cabin, back to the horror they desperately tried to escape. Suddenly, a low hum vibrated through the ground, as if the earth itself was warning them. The wind picked up, rustling the leaves, forming an echoing chaos that seemed to whisper secrets. Follow us to the truth." No, Sarah breathed, feeling the edges of her sanity slip. The words pricked at her, an invitation to another world, drawing her in with dark allure. "Mommy," Ben cried out, pointing into the trees. "Look." A flickering light appeared in the distance, pale and beckoning. Was it salvation, or another trap waiting to ensnare them? Each heartbeat thundered in her ears as she weighed their options. "What if it's a way out?" Ben urged, a flicker of hope shining through his panic. But Sarah remembered the chest, the voice that promised them help yet revealed only torment. "We can't trust anything," she snapped, trying to mask the helicoptering fear within her. "Please, Mommy, we have to go," Lily pleaded, her eyes wide and shimmering with tears, reflecting the uncertainty cloaking them all. The weight of her children's fears wrapped around her like iron shackles. With a deep breath, she made her choice. "Okay, but stay together." They moved toward the light, anxious but determined. The environment grew eerily quiet as they approached, only the sound of their quickening breaths echoing. The light brightened, revealing an old lantern hanging from a tree, its flickering flame illuminating something grotesque on the ground. A small shrine carved from twisted branches held damp, decaying offerings. A doll with one eye missing, a rusted key, and various bones. The sight made bile rise in Sarah's throat. This was not a good omen but a tribute to remnants of terror. The lantern shuddered as if responding to their presence, the flame sputtering ominously. A low rumble filled the air, and with a shuddering breath, the path behind them darkened rapidly as if that stretch of the forest was being consumed. In a panic, she turned to flee, but the ground trembled underneath them, roots rising, clawing at their feet. "Run! Now!" Sarah screamed, pulling her children toward the only direction left, the light, as they sprinted. The shadows coiled and unfurled, gaining speed, chasing them, hungry for their fear. Would the lantern reveal a way out or be the final mark that condemned them to whatever horrors awaited in the grip of the forest? The darkness was gathering, their only path narrowing. Would they find daylight, or was it already too late? The shadows pressed in on them, a relentless tide threatening to swallow them whole. Sarah's heart raced as she gripped her children's hands, determination surging through her veins like a fireball. They had run through a world wrapped in darkness, and now hope glimmered in the distance like a lighthouse beckoning lost sailors home. "Keep running," she shouted, the command slicing through the thickening air. They sprinted, the dirt of the forest floor crumbling beneath them, as if even the ground was alive, trying to snatch their feet from beneath them. Behind them, the malevolent sounds of that dark chant grew louder, their own names twisted into a threatening melody. The world twisted in and out, filled with eerie sounds that combined with their deep, terrified breaths. They had to escape this nightmare. With every stride, Sarah kept her focus on the flickering lantern. Its light danced brilliantly against the encroaching night, illuminating the twisted roots and grotesque offerings scattered around the shrine. The sight sent fresh waves of nausea through her, but she forced it back. There was something about that lantern that felt alive, something that felt like it could protect them. As they neared the lantern, Sarah, mouth dry and throat tight, reached out. "If we can just get to the light then." A piercing shriek filled the air, a sound so raw it clawed at their sanity. She turned back, her blood running cold as a dark figure erupted from the shadows, its hollow eyes shining, searching for them with primal hunger. "Faster!" she gasped, adrenaline rocketing through her veins as they lunged towards the lantern. With a desperate leap, they reached the shrine, Sarah's breath hitching as she fell to her knees. She yanked her kids close, urging them to stay down. "Please let this work," she murmured, clutching the lantern, feeling its warmth seeping into her palms. The flames suddenly blazed high, illuminating the purgatorial gloom, casting the monstrous figure into relief, its shape warped and terrifying, a creature born from nightmares. The creature snarled, its clawed appendages reaching out, but as the fire brightened, its approach halted. It recoiled as though the light burned its very essence. "Stay behind me," Sarah shouted, enveloping her children in her body as she faced the horror. Each heartbeat echoed in her ears like an urgent drum, the fire casting flickering shadows, and for a moment, she felt a surge of power. They could combat it, they could push back the darkness. The creature snarled, anger coursing through it as it lunged again. But Sarah held her ground, raising the lantern high. "You will not take them." The flames flared, swirling colors dancing in a chaotic dance of hope and defiance. The terror screeched, a tortured howl erupting from its throat, drowning beneath the essence of light. For a heartbeat, everything froze: the forest, her breath, the shadows, and Sarah understood. It wasn't merely survival. It was about confronting the darkness, a fight that echoed through generations. A realization struck her. Her bond with Edgar Whitley connected with a legacy of fear, one born of her family's history, a history that she now chose to rewrite. "Let the light in," Sarah shouted, flexing her will against the looming darkness. The lantern blazed brighter, illuminating the shroud of the forest. Light collided with darkness in a grand clash, shaking the very roots beneath their feet. The figure writhed, shadows flickering back in fear. And then, a scream erupted, a desperate sound that echoed through the trees, a cry of defeat. As quick as it had appeared, the darkness began to dissipate, wafting away like smoke pulled from a flame. The shrieks faded, the woods growing quiet once more, returning to a stillness that lingered like a calm embrace after a storm. What lingered was not fear, but a sense of completion. The shadows receded into the trees, leaving Sarah and her children standing in the glow of the lantern. The threads of terror severed, if only for a moment. Breathless, Sarah collapsed to the ground, pulling Ben and Lily close. Their faces, drawn but hopeful, reflected in the lantern's eerie glow, a testament of survival against despair. "Is it gone?" Ben whispered, looking up at his mother with wide eyes. "For now," Sarah answered, wrapping her arms around them, feeling the warmth of their bodies against her own. The weight of the lantern felt lighter, its duty fulfilled. They would have to journey through this again, no doubt, but they were armed with love, courage, and, for now, a victory over the darkness. Just as dawn's first light began to peek through the trees, signaling the end of their harrowing night, Sarah looked at her children and breathed in the fresh air, liberating herself from the shackles of fear. They had survived, and that was worth everything. But deep down, Sarah understood this wouldn't be the end. The stories whispered on the wind spoke of legacy, and she was now part of that tale. A protector, a guide. And if darkness crept back, they would be ready. Together, as they made their way back through the waking forest, they heard distant voices, echoes of the past and present intertwined. And as if the woods themselves had agreed, fragments of light danced and glimmered, promising a new dawn, a fresh chapter, waiting to be written. Let their legacy start anew. Subscribe immediately to the channel so you don't miss out on future exclusive stories that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Smash that like button now to feed the algorithm. Your support means everything. Flood the comments section with your reactions and theories about this thrilling conclusion. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to witness this epic adventure. Only true fans understand how vital your support is. So let us make this community grow.